Puma is known for creating some pretty flashy, but also surprisingly affordable football boots. And here we have a model that's going to check both of those boxes in the Puma Future 7 Match. These are the third tier takedown from the Future 7 series, and they're going to retail for less than $90. And one of the reasons I think it's worth taking a look at these boots is because they're going to offer both a look and a feel that's pretty different compared to anything you get in this price range. But the most important question is, are they going to be a good option for you? And that's exactly what we'll try and find out in this video. So we're going to cover all the features of these boots, both good and bad, and we'll also see how they stack up against the competition. And at the end of the video, if you're interested in the Puma Future Match or any of the other boots that we discuss, you can find links to them on sale in the description below. So without further ado, let's start off as we normally do, going over the design. So right off the bat with the new Future 7 Match, I noticed that you're going to get a really similar aesthetic to the more expensive models. In this case, that's going to be the Pro and the Ultimate version. And so unsurprisingly, the first thing you notice with these boots is that they're going to have a really clean full knit upper. So the star of the show is going to be this, what Puma calls fusion fit material that runs all throughout the center of the midfoot. Now I remember this being a really premium stretchy knit material from my review of the Pro model. And I'm impressed to say that with the Match version, even though it's around $60 to $70 less at a full retail price, the stretchiness and quality of the knit material still feels the same as that more expensive version. And what surprised me more is that the rest of the upper actually takes a slightly different approach to the more expensive versions. With the Pro and the Ultimate, you actually had a slightly stickier coating to the rest of the upper towards the toe box and the sides of the boot. However, with the Match version here, you're actually not going to have a sticky coating throughout the upper. Instead, you're going to have these embossed textural elements throughout the upper. And these rigid elements really remind me of what you would find on the Predator from Adidas, as well as the Tequila V4 from New Balance. In fact, if you look at the side of the boots here, this is towards the outer step of the football boots. It actually has a really similar texture and pattern to what you found on the old Phantom GT2, if you can remember those boots. And this added texture isn't just for flashiness, it actually is covered all throughout the upper, and it's definitely going to be enough to make a difference with your touch on the ball. And then looking up towards the lacing system, you are going to have Puma's Power Tape material that kind of forms this tri-star-like pattern across the top of the boot. And when I first saw this design, I was kind of questioning to myself, what is that even doing? Is it just for aesthetics? Does it add any purpose whatsoever? And actually, I was wrong in thinking that it didn't do anything at all, because Puma did add this for a reason. And the reason they added it is because this stretchy knit material all throughout the center of the football boots is actually quite loose. So it's not going to provide a whole lot of shape, structure, or lockdown to the boots, and we'll get into that more later. But what this fusion, or I should say Power Tape, does is it kind of connects the knit material to the more rigid rest of the upper on the football boot. So it connects on all three sides at the toe box and then both sides of the boot. And what that does is it just kind of constrains that knit material, especially towards the top of the foot here, so it won't stretch quite as much. And Puma does that in an attempt just to make sure that the fit is a little bit more secure. And we're going to talk a lot more about the lockdown of these boots a little bit later in the video. And when it comes to the lacing system of these boots, this is probably one of the most unique features of the Puma Future series. And the more I try on boots like this, the more I'm not quite sure that I'm in love with the style of this lacing system, because how the Puma Futures are designed, and this applies not just to the Match version that I have here, but the more expensive versions as well, is that they're basically designed to be a laceless football boot, almost in aesthetic, right? So the laces are a very minimal addition to the football boots. They actually, you can tell, they only cross the top of your foot here about 3 times before you reach the final lace hole. And there's obviously no traditional tongue, it's just a sleek one-piece upper held together mostly by this knit material. And essentially what you end up with is a feeling that the laces are just being tightened directly on top of your feet. So there's not really going to be much structure there. And it's a feeling that some people are gonna like and some people are probably not gonna like. But a minimal, less structured lacing system is pretty much a consequence of Puma trying to make this a really authentic sock-like football boot. And if sock-like is what you want, then that's definitely what you're gonna get with this model. Towards the inside of the boots here, you are going to get just a moderate amount of padding towards the heel, not a ton, but just a little bit to help reduce any irritation. And then if we go on the back side of the boot, you're going to see a very familiar sole plate. And that's because this is going to be pretty much identical to the outsole that you find on the Future 7 Pro that I reviewed several months ago. You're basically going to get an FG AG hybrid. So for those who don't know, that means that this sole plate is appropriate for use on both firm ground and artificial grass. Some may also refer to this as an MG or multi-ground stud pattern, but essentially what Puma is doing here is they've included both conical studs around the heel and forefoot, but also towards the front of the boot, there are some slightly sharper bladed studs. But even those bladed studs towards the top of the boot, if you can see here, they do have somewhat dull or rounded off edges, so they're not going to be quite as sharp or aggressive as some of the chevron studs that you see on more aggressive FG boots. So while usually I prefer to use boots with all conical studs on artificial grass, I would feel fine using this kind of stud pattern on AG if I had to. All right, that should pretty much cover all the main points on the design, so let's move on to the fit and feel. So I think anyone who's interested in these boots will be happy to know that comfort is definitely a high point when it comes to the Future 7 match. These boots are really easy to slip on. The first thing I notice is just how accommodating that stretchy knit upper is, and as I mentioned in my review of the Future 7 Pro, the Future is going to be, in my opinion, the widest football boot that Puma has to offer, and that is definitely still true when it comes to the Future 7 match. And you especially appreciate that width throughout the midfoot because that's where you get so much of that stretchy knit material. And the length of these boots was great as well. I had just about less than a ½ centimeter or so of space at the front of the boot, and that's normally what I look for. So if you are interested in picking up a pair, I would definitely recommend going true to size. Now, when it comes to the lacing system, there were a few things that I wasn't a huge fan of because this setup is so minimal with the laces just resting directly on top of that knit material. As soon as you tighten those laces, you're going to get a decent amount of pressure on the top of your feet. Now, it does dissipate a bit over time, but I think it's important to point out because it's not really something that you get on other boots with more traditional lacing systems. But just because Puma emphasizes this knit upper so much in the Futures here, it really relies a lot on these laces to get you enough lockdown. And for me, I like my feet, ankles, and heels really tight and secured in the football boots, and that means I have to tie the laces really tight here, and sometimes that can just create a little bit of discomfort towards the top of the foot. And that leads me to a slightly larger discussion about the design of these boots, and that's that the knit upper that Puma is using in the Futures, it's kind of the biggest strength and the biggest weakness of these boots. Because the good thing about that knit material is it is extremely comfortable, especially when you're taking the boots on and off, and just when you're wearing them casually, walking around, that stretch is going to be so accommodating, the material feels really premium. But comfort is only one of the key aspects we look at when it comes to football boots, and the other that has to be considered is performance. And I think that with this high volume of knit material that's used throughout the Future 7s, performance is something that gets slightly left behind. And that's just because with how this upper is designed, you're not going to get quite as much security or lockdown as you would get from a more conventional football boot. And I think some other alternatives in this same category are going to give you more lockdown too. This is a pair of the Nike Vapor 16 Pros, which in fairness are going to retail for about $60 to $70 more than the Pumas. But when you look at the design of the knit material here on the Nikes, the knit is pretty much just running for a few centimeters directly on top of the boots. And then as soon as you transition to the side here, you're going to have a much more solid material to the rest of the upper. And then when we go over to the Puma Futures here, you're going to have a way wider opening with this knit material, and this stretchy knit collar extends further down to the sides of the boots. And while the expansion of that knit material is great for the comfort of these boots, it's just not great for the lockdown. So let's move on to how these factors affected playing in the Future match. So I don't want to be too harsh on these boots because I actually did have a lot of fun playing in the new Future 7 match. I mean, they're really comfortable boots and you do get a ton of sensitivity from the upper because it is razor thin, and I also really enjoyed how much texturing was added throughout the upper, especially considering a lot of these textured elements just weren't present on the more expensive versions. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I feel like these felt very similar to play-in to the Puma Future Pro, which is going to retail for around $50 to $60 more. But I do have to say, when dribbling or running at higher speeds or even changing direction quickly, that's when I noticed some flaws with playing in these boots. I just felt that the combination of this stretchy knit collar as well as this very minimalist lacing system kind of struggled to keep my heel and ankle just stationary and locked in inside the football boots. Now, I don't want to get it twisted. The lockdown on the Puma Future 7 match is not that bad. I've recently reviewed the Puma King Pro. The lockdown on these boots is terrible. Like, honestly, maybe one of the worst feeling boots I've tried on over the past 2 years. Definitely, maybe in my bottom 3, probably bottom 5 for sure. But when it comes to the Future 7 match, just a little, you can tell that there's something lacking. You're just missing that little bit of security. It's like when you get one of those little turf pellets in your boots and it's just a little bit annoying. You can tell it's there. That's kind of how I felt with the lockdown in these boots. My heel wasn't coming out of the boots, but it just didn't feel very secure. I could tell that I just didn't feel locked in when I was going for a sprint or changing direction. And for me, I don't really like that because I don't want to be thinking about the lockdown of my boots when I'm wearing them. You know, like, you want to think about playing, especially if you are in a game. You know, you want to be thinking about playing football. You don't want to be thinking about how your boots are feeling. Now, I do want to say you can play around with the lockdown just by adjusting and tightening the lacing system in some places. So after I played around in these for a few minutes, I did just undo the laces and tied them up while standing to be a little bit tighter, and it did help the problems just to a certain degree. But I think because of how loose and stretchy this knit material is, the lockdown hits a certain upper threshold where it's just not really going to get any better the more you tighten the laces. But if the boots already fit snug to your feet when you go true to size, and when you get the laces really tight in this last little section towards your ankle, you are going to get enough lockdown, and they're definitely going to be sufficient for playing in. Next up, let's talk value. Now listen, third tier Puma football boots, they basically give these things away. I mean, all jokes aside, you can usually find these third tier takedowns on crazy sales. So while $90 is the full retail price for these, I'm pretty sure most of the colorways, you can usually find them for around $70 or less. And in my opinion, that's gonna be a pretty good price for the quality that you're getting, especially considering that between this and the Pro version, the materials feel very, very close, especially the quality of this knit material. And then I actually really like the upper that Puma went for with this kind of slick material with this textured emboss feeling on both sides of the boot there. So I think they feel really premium to the touch, and at around $70 to $80, you can't go wrong. But depending on the features that you are looking for, there might be some other models that can do it just a little bit better than the Puma Future 7 match. And so for more on that, let's talk about the competition to these football boots. So as far as comparisons go, I wanted to talk about a few football boots that are going to be roughly in a similar price range to the Puma Future 7 match, because I don't want to just go out and tell you, yeah, this $240 New Balance Tequila V4 is going to be a better boot. So I do have some great options around the same price, and the first one I want to start with is the Kipsta Jaguar. Now the Kipstas are coming out of France, so they're a little bit more popular right now in Europe, but you can find them in the US if you order online. And if you look at the Kipsta Jaguar and you look at the Puma Future 7 there, while the colorways are very different in these two boots, the design aesthetic is actually very similar. These boots both have, this slick one-piece upper design with a stretchy knit collar and that knit material running all through the center of the boots. Now, when it comes to aesthetics alone, I will say I think that Puma wins this one. Generally, not just in this colorway, but in the other colorways as well. I just think I like how the Pumas are designed a little bit more streamlined, I think, compared to the Kipstas, which maybe to the touch feel a little bit more like they're acting their price tag compared to the Pumas, which might feel a bit more premium. But all of that being said, I actually prefer how the Kipstas feel on feet compared to the Puma Futures. And that's just because the lacing system that's on the Kipstas here is going to give you considerably more lockdown compared to what you would get on the Future 7. So with the Kipstas, you're still going to get that stretch and comfort provided from the knit material, but you're also just going to get a lot more security towards the ankle and heel area. And overall, I think these are a great deal for a knit one-piece upper football boot. I think the retail price is technically 70 euros, and that roughly translates to $90. But then a couple other options that are going to give you a similar feel to the Future 7 match here. I wanted to shout out a second tier takedown from Nike that I am a huge fan of. If you've watched previous videos of mine, it would be the Tiempo Legend 10 Pro. Now, at this point in time, the Legend 10 Pro is gonna retail for, maybe you can find it on sale for $110 to $120, so it is gonna be a little bit more expensive than the Future 7 match. But I think if you can stretch your budget that extra $20 to $30, I think you are gonna get a slightly better football boot. And if you are after that sensation of having that soft knitted collar, you are going to get a really nice elasticated knit inner liner with the new Legend 10 Pro. And then on top of that really soft, stretchy knit inner liner, you're also going to get a great new Fly Touch upper that kind of feels like leather, although it is synthetic. And overall, I just think the Tiempos are going to give you slightly better fit and slightly better performance compared to the Futures. And then my final comparison, just because they are $90, and I feel like I bring up this boot in almost every video, but it is going to be the F50 League. And I'm talking about the F50 League, whether it's in the standard version or the messy variation. I mean, I've said it before, but I still think that the F50 League is probably the best third tier takedown and the best $90 football boot that I've tried on this year. Now, it's going to have a more traditional lacing system and more traditional design compared to the Future 7, but if budget is your main constraint and both of them retail for around $90, I do think that the F50s are going to be slightly better value. And for those who do have wide feet, I also have wide feet, and I found that the fit of the F50 Leagues were more than accommodating for me. All right, so those were 3 solid alternatives that you might want to consider. And with that out of the way, what are my final thoughts on the Puma Future 7 match? So honestly, I gotta give credit to Puma with these boots because I think the Futures overall have a pretty ambitious design to them, and I am impressed with this third tier takedown, how much quality Puma were able to put in these pair of boots for such a modest price tag. And for those of you who really like that free-flowing sock-like experience that the Future is kind of known for, you're definitely gonna get that from the Future match. But for players who are looking for something that's going to provide a little bit more security and lockdown, especially towards the heel and ankle area, you may be better off looking at some of the competitors we discussed. But I do think it's worth it for almost any player to try on just one pair of the Puma Futures, whether it be the Ultimate, Pro, or Match version. Just because then you can see how it feels, and then if you like them, you can keep them, and if you don't, you can always return them for another pair. And guys, that is going to do it for my review of the Puma Future 7 match. So please let me know in the comments below if you've gotten the chance to try on these boots and what you think of them. Also, please let me know if there's any other boots you're interested in me reviewing as well. And if you have enjoyed the content, feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you can stay in the loop on the latest reviews. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.